Everyone, welcome back to Stereo Showdown. This is a series where we take a look at different vinyl pressings in order to understand which is the superior sounding one. And today we'll be tackling Metallica's 1991 classic album, their fifth studio album, self-titled, otherwise known as the Black Album. And this coincides with the 30th Anniversary Remaster that came out late last year, 2021. And we'll be tackling 5 different pressings, these pressings that you see here. So we have a 1991 original UK pressing on Vertigo Records, followed by a 2000 reissue on Simply Vinyl. This was pressed in the UK. Followed by the 2008 45 RPM edition. This is a remaster on Warner Brothers Records. Then we have the 2014 Blackened edition. This is a reissue. And then finally we have the 2021 Blackened Remaster. That's the latest version that you can find. And of course, just like my previous episode, I will be mixing up all of these sound clips as well as masking where these sound clips come from. So just keep track of A through E, which is your favorite letter. And before we get into all that, I just want to touch on my audio signal path. So that all said, that's how I formed my opinion. And of course, YouTube, whatever compression they do to these videos is going to add something to the audio. So what you hear may not be what I hear, but I do encourage you to put on some headphones to really hear the differences, especially when it comes to the way that they switch between the sides in terms of stereo, they panning from left to right, right to left, that sort of a thing. I think that pretty much covers everything, so let's get into this. We're going to start with side 1, track 1, Enter the Sandman. I want you to listen for when the drums come in during the intro. All right, so let's jump to the end of the chorus vocal. And finally, let's check out the guitar solo. All right, moving on to Sad But True. Listen for the drums when they come in during the intro. Now we're going to move towards the end of the guitar solo. And finally, we're going to move towards the end of the song when he sings Sad But True. 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 All right, moving on to track 3, Holier Than Thou. Check out when the drums hit during the beginning. During this section, I want you to pay attention to the overall mix. And lastly, check out the detail in the bass and drum section here. All right, moving on to side B, we have the Unforgiven, and I want you to pay attention to the presence of the acoustic guitar in the beginning. Now listen to how the vocals fade into the guitar here.
So I dug the So I dug the So I dug the So I dug the So I dug the
And now listen for the quality of the cymbal hit. All right, next we have Wherever I May Roam, and listen for the sitar-like guitar and this breathy bass element. Now listen for how well the vocals and the drums play together. And lastly, check out where the guitar solo changes tempo here. All right, now we have Don't Tread on Me, and I want you to pay attention to how the drums support the vocals in the beginning here.
Don't tread on me. 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 Don't tread on me.
And now listen to this section right before the solo.
Touch me again with the words that you will hear evermore. Touch me again with the words that you will hear evermore. Touch me again with the words that you will hear evermore. Touch me again with the words that you will hear evermore. Touch me again with the words that you will hear evermore.
And speaking of the solo, let's jump towards the end of it. All right, moving on to side C, we have Through the Never, and I want you to pay attention to the guitar tone and the cymbal hits in the beginning.
All that is, was, and will be. All that is, was, and will be.
listen for how well you can hear the deep vocal part saying the title of the song. And lastly, I want you to listen for this section right towards the end of the solo. Up next, we have Nothing Else Matters, and I want you to listen for the vocals here, see if you can tell any differences when they first come in.
Never opened myself this way. 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 Never opened myself this way.
All right, for this next section, pay attention to the bass and strings. And now listen for where the vocals sit in the mix.
Nothing else matters. No, nothing else matters. No, nothing else matters. No, nothing else matters. No, nothing else matters.
All right, moving on to Of Wolf and Man, and listen for the line Shapeshift. Now I want you to listen for the overall mix of this section. How full does it sound?
Back to the meaning of life. 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 Back to the meaning of life.
And for this last section, pay attention to the double hits on the bass drum.
So seek the wolf in that land. 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 So seek the wolf in that land.
All right, flipping over to side D, we have The God That Failed, and I want you to pay attention to when the guitars first come in. All right, now listen to the vocals here.
It frees, it grows, it climbs all that you will know. It frees, it grows, it climbs all that you will know. It frees, it grows, it climbs all that you will know. It frees, it grows, it climbs all that you will know. It frees, it grows, it climbs all that you will know.
And lastly, check out the guitar solo section. All right, moving on to My Friend of Misery. And for the intro, I want you to pay attention to the signal to noise ratio. How quiet is this passage? Now for this quiet section, listen for the guitar. And now we're moving to the end of the song, and I want you to pay attention to the overall mix. How well can you hear everything? How full does it sound? And last up, we have The Struggle Within, and I want you to pay attention to when the guitar first comes in. And we're moving on to when the vocals first come in.
Kicking at a dead horse, pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude. Kicking at a dead horse, pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude. Kicking at a dead horse, pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude. Kicking at a dead horse, pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude. Kicking at a dead horse, pleases you. No way of showing your gratitude.
And lastly, we're going to move to the guitar solo. Okay, so are you ready for the results? Here they are. For me personally, when I first started listening, I was confused. I thought I had messed up. And I do want to back up a little bit. I had basically synced everything up and given, I assigned letters to each of my track names, but I let the file be for a while and I came back to it like a week or so later, so I couldn't remember what letter I gave each pressing. And so I was doing this blind just like you. But when I first started listening, I was so confused because every pressing sounded the same. I thought I had screwed up somehow, but no, sure enough, every file name was a little different. And so so that being said, like, you know, overall, I think any of these pressings are pretty good. But for my money, for my ears, I can definitely hear a difference. And my favorite version, the version I think sounds the best, is this one right here, the 45 RPM edition. This is 4 LPs. So you can imagine it's a little bit more involved if you want to listen to the album this way versus the 2 LP edition, which is how it normally comes. But that being said, though, that extra space, the mastering on this is just, it's beautiful. But I will say, though, that the original pressing, this UK pressing, I was blown away by. Other than a little bit of surface noise due to age, these two are very, very close. Like, I was so impressed with that original mix. Now, so really, it's a toss-up. For convenience, I would go with the original pressing, but if you want like the best sonic quality on vinyl, you're gonna go with this version. Now, below that, it's kind of a toss-up between the 2014 Blackened edition and the 2021 remastered Blackened edition. They sound the same to me. I don't know exactly. Maybe here and there's minute differences, but this remaster doesn't sound that different to me at all, really. Like, I was switching between those two and, you know, maybe here and there was a slight difference, but I could not. If I had a gun to my head and I had to decide between these I couldn't tell you which one is which. And finally, that's Simply Vinyl. That was my least favorite of all of them. It just sounded kind of tinny, sort of flat. It felt lifeless dynamically. It felt very middle of the road. And I don't know if that's because it was mastered from a digital source, like it came from a CD source or something. I don't know, but for some, considering I didn't pay that much for it, but it does go for quite a bit of money. But honestly, I think the 2021 edition is perfectly fine. I mean, it is very, very close to an original pressing. And, any four of these, the 2021, this 45 RPM edition, an original pressing, or the 2014 Blackened edition, they all sound really good to me. It's just, slight little differences really edge out this one. And I'm curious if those of you who own this or own other of their albums in this format, if you feel the same way. And also let me know what you think of this overall. Did you agree with me? Did you disagree? Which one was your favorite? Which one was your least favorite? I'm really curious to know. And yeah, that will do it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I love doing these kind of things. And it's such a blast to, train your ears to zero in on minute little differences. I really think it makes you a better listener, especially when you can kind of like flow between the different parts of the vocals and the low end of the bass and the guitar, and like differentiate what you're hearing and really identify it. And also take the big picture in too. Listen to the overall mix. And I think all of that is just so much fun, especially if it's one of your favorite albums. I think you really notice all these little details when you're kind of taking each part on its own. So yeah. Anyway, that'll do it for today. Thank you again. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.